Welcome to the video audience. I'm Sherwin. A couple of you have called this week wanting to know how to support Laketon Bethel. Just go to the website, laketonbethel.org, and there's instructions on there. I want to start out today by talking about tasks that we all have that we really don't like doing. Just think of something you have to do that you don't like to do. For me, it's responding to emails. Seems like I get 200-300 a day, delete 90% of them, and then sometimes I delete the wrong ones and miss them, but I just don't like that job. And then there's snail mail, the good old post office stuff. I'll kind of wait until the drawer fills up and then I tackle that. It's miserable. This week, nice letter from the state of Michigan saying I paid too many taxes last year. That was fun. But other than that, I don't really care for it. Another thing I don't like to do is exercise. I think about all that I know I should exercise. A daughter who's a physical therapist who reminds me I need to exercise every time she sees me, but I just don't get much satisfaction from those tasks. And you probably have those that I really like prepping for Sundays, and I like prepping food for other people. Just to make you all jealous, I have a Dutch beef roast in the crock pot right now, just waiting for me when I get home. I get major satisfaction from that, so that sort of thing. But other tasks I don't like mowing the lawn, And this next picture here, the folks in Sheffield, Iowa, probably will recognize this. This is a Reformed Church cemetery. And what happens with these old country churches, they all had a little cemetery next to them. So that's one of the few cemeteries in the country where you have to be Reformed to be buried there. It's just kind of a unique situation. Now I had a friend that went to that church as a pastor, and you get the job description, you look it over, you see if you want to do it. But the unwritten job description for him was he had to mow that cemetery. And he was quite insulted by that. It's just a big cemetery. There's more dead people in Iowa than living, he's sometimes saying. But he had to mow that cemetery. He hated it at first, and then he started doing it as an act of service. And he actually enjoyed it. And then he found that people could come and visit the graves of their deceased loved ones and actually had a good time with it. And so he began to get tremendous satisfaction out of doing that job. What are some tasks that you don't like to do? I can think of one that, actually I Googled this and found out the number one task that people hate in this country is washing dishes. And, and say, we should be grateful because we have food, but that's the number one task. I rarely wash dishes myself because I'm not very good at it. Another task that people don't like is cleaning the bathroom. Well, I'm extremely fortunate with that task because I'm sure I wouldn't like it, but the bathrooms in my house just clean themselves. It's an amazing thing to see how that happens. And then another task that I just can't do is changing diapers. I've never been good at that. When my son Joel, who's 35 years old now, one time made a really extra nasty mess, I actually paid the neighbor $20 to change him because I was watching him myself. She wouldn't take it. But, when I was in South Dakota, one of the guys in the church is actually an elder, taught me how to change diapers. And I didn't see John here today, but he was the one I experimented on. He's almost 40 now. But this elder told me that the way to change diapers on a kid, simple. You get a big old cigar and you light it. You go into a small room and fill it up with that cigar smoke, then take the kid in there, change the diaper, you won't gag or nothing. Permanent damage to the kid's lungs probably, but at least you won't have to, deal with it. Well, Jesus teaches us that when we do the nasty jobs for people as his representative, that's when we are most blessed. And that's what we want to talk about today. Today is traditionally Palm Sunday. And you know the thing where you have, that's been done, Jesus comes into Jerusalem riding on a donkey. For those of you who are politically astute, not an elephant, a donkey. Nobody gets that one. They laid down palm branches as a sign of submission, a sign of victory. And then, according to the Gospel of John, on the night before he was betrayed, they did a Passover supper, which was a big annual deal for Jewish people. Jesus did it with his students on Thursday night. Now, Thursday, during this week before Easter, is called Maundy Thursday. And nobody really knows why. So I thought I'd explain that again. It's Maundy Thursday comes from a Latin phrase, mandatum novi, which means new command, because it was at this supper that Jesus said, I'm giving you a new command, that you love one another just as I have loved you. So that's why it's Maundy, means mandate or command. So here's the passage I want us to look at today from John chapter 13. Just before the Passover feast, Jesus knew that the time had come to leave this world to go to the Father. Having loved his dear companions, he continued to love them right to the end. It was supper time. The devil by now had Judas, son of Simon the Iscariot, firmly in his grip, all set for the betrayal. See, the Jewish leaders had to get rid of Jesus because he was popular. But his popularity posed a problem because they had to get rid of him quietly. They couldn't do it straight up. And Satan was, especially according to John, orchestrating all this from the background. See, his misconception was, as Jesus pointed out in one of his parables, if I can kill the Son, I can take over the planet. And that's what he intended to do. He intended to have Jesus put to death and then take over and rule the planet. See, he's jealous of God's attention to humans, so he wanted to torture and kill all of the humans, just out of jealousy. And that's when Jesus offered his life as a ransom for the human race. The devil didn't expect a resurrection. He didn't expect that God's life-creating power, his Logos, could generate that kind of a response. So the devil kind of made a mistake there. Here's from, this passage goes on like this. Jesus knew that the Father had put him in complete charge of everything, that he came from God and was on his way back to God. So he got up from the supper table, set aside his robe, and put on an apron. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the feet of the disciples, drying them with his apron. When he got to Simon Peter, Peter said, Master, you wash my feet? Now notice this passage. The Father had put Jesus in charge of everything. What does he do? He washes feet. He does servant work. And that was a nasty job because they shared the roads with animals in those days. And they had sandals which amounted to a thick leather strap held onto your foot with thinner leather straps. And that's all that it was. It was a nasty job. Whenever I read this passage about the foot washing, I think of our youngest daughter, Jamie. First time I took her to the Iowa State Fair, she's probably 8 or 9 years old. And it was comical because she sat with my dad at a boar judging contest for an hour and a half. And I thought, this is strange. I did some other things, came back. She's still sitting there with my dad, just glued to people walking boars around. An hour and a half at a boar show, that would, to me, seem boring. But anyway, there she was, and she'd giggle every once in a while. And so I said, well, Jamie, what's so funny here? She says, those pigs poop wherever they want. She thought it was hilarious. And but it's true. And if you look at the people who were showing the boars and the judges, if you looked at their feet, they were covered in, droppings. And if you can imagine an environment where you wear sandals, that kind of thing, or go barefoot, be kind of nasty. But anyway, Peter objected to having Jesus wash his feet. He didn't want a servant, he wanted a monarch, he wanted a king. So the passage goes on like this. Jesus answered, "You don't understand what I'm doing, but it will be clear enough to you later." Peter persisted, "You're not going to wash my feet, ever." Jesus said, "If I don't wash you, you can't be part of what I'm doing." So, Peter always talked first and then thought about it later. But he did not want Jesus to do menial tasks. He wanted him to do glorious things. He wanted a God, not a servant. But Jesus came to serve. So Peter says this, and Jesus says this, and then it goes on. "Master," said Peter, "not only my feet then, wash my hands, wash my head." Jesus said, "If you had a bath in the morning, you only need your feet washed now, and you're clean from head to toe. My concern, you understand, is holiness, not hygiene. So now you're clean." See, it was the custom if somebody invited you over for an evening meal, you took a bath, went there clean, your feet got nasty on the way over there. And that's why they had to be clean. And by cleaning the feet of his disciples, Jesus was showing a clean heart, that he was called to serve. And as his representatives, we serve. The passage goes on like this. "But not every one of you." He knew who was betraying him. That's why he said, "Not every one of you." After he had finished washing their feet, he took his robe, put it back on, and went back to his place at the table. So just picture this in your head. Jesus washing the feet of his betrayer. He served Judas his first communion. I just think there had to have been some interesting eye contact going on in that time. Don't you think that would have been something to see? Well, the passage goes on. Then he said, "Do you understand what I've done to you? You address me as teacher and master, and rightly so. That is what I am. So if I, the master and teacher, washed your feet, you must now wash each other's feet. I've laid down a pattern for you. What I've done, you do. I'm only pointing out the obvious." So Jesus is the humble servant to his students. And his students, in turn, are the humble servants to the world. Jesus is your humble servant, just like he was in that day, demonstrated by washing the feet of his disciples. And you are the humble servant of the people in your life. Now, Jesus goes on with this. He says, "A servant is not ranked above his master. An employee doesn't give orders to the employer. If you understand what I'm telling you, act like it and live a blessed life." So he's saying, act like you understand this. Act like this. Be a servant. Serve. Live a blessed life. And I think that could be better translated as a contented life, but I didn't translate it. Live a life of purpose. So here's the radical thought for today. Jesus is your humble servant. That's his purpose. It was his purpose then, and it's his purpose now, to serve you while you serve. He is with you as you humbly serve. The blessing doesn't come from being served, it comes from serving. What can you do to make life better for those around you? What can you do to make the church better? As Jesus is your humble servant, you are his. And this plays out with how you treat each other. You serve your spouse, and your marriage gets better. You serve your family, and your family will be better. Serve your neighbors, and your neighborhood gets better. Serve your church, and your church gets better. Serve humbly, and your life will be better. As John said in the first chapter of this gospel, he said this, from his abundance we have all received one gracious blessing after another. He intends to bless us as we, as his representatives, serve through him. And now to our video audience, as always, thanks for listening. And for the rest of you, we are going to proceed to being served the sacrament of the Lord's Supper.